Good morning and welcome to our next class in Ecclesiastes. By way of explanation, the class that I did on this lesson, we had some technical difficulties on the recording. And so I was asked to do this again. So I'm just doing it for you, those who are watching online. So very thankful that you visit these classes, and I pray that you are edified by them. So with that, I just want to start with last lesson. Last time we got together with Ecclesiastes, in that lesson, there was yet another poetic device used to teach us about not being flippant about God, but rather to fear God, and much like the conclusion that we'll see at the end of the book. And the context of that last passage was in the form of worship and served as a warning to today's churches and the propensity for relaxed worship, such as making up methods of worship, especially those that are focused more on people's needs as opposed to not worshiping as God commanded. Flippant prayer, that drives me nuts. So to do so, the poem opened with the command to walk prudently as you prepare to go to worship. So walk prudently. There's a preparation. Prepare your heart. Know that you are stepping into the special presence of Almighty God, and that you do take on a reverential demeanor. Therefore, when you go to worship, prepare yourself beforehand. Sing for His glory. Give for His glory. Listen to the word for His glory. Pray for His glory. And then what followed in this poetic device was the thrice used command, reason, proverb. So it's a pattern. Command, reason, proverb. And that was repeated 3 times. And so we took a closer look at each one. First, in the context of worship, this means that we exercise care in how we speak to God and with one another. Our speech is to be one of reverence, respect, and love as we respond in prayer and fellowship. So that's first. So it's how we speak. Second, it's better not to vow than to vow and not pay. And practically speaking, for us today, it's truly better to not engage in negotiation with God through vows. Rather, it's best to simply pray. And then thirdly, what was brought up is actually a combined repeat of the first 2. Don't be rash with your mouth. Don't delay paying your vow. And so a mouth that exudes untruth, hurtful language, thoughtless words, or empty promises causes your flesh to sin, and failing to follow through with the promise is also sin. The fact that that third commandment, that third part, was a repeat, again, is another Hebrew device of placing emphasis. It's like setting a whole bunch of exclamation marks behind it. And the conclusion to that poem was to fear God, which also echoes the conclusion that we'll reach at the end of Ecclesiastes. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. This is the foundational issue. And to be sure, there are many churches that demean the name of Christ through worship that is more entertainment than worship. This passage is the call to fear God and honor Him in our worship and our lives under the sun. So that was the last lesson. Now in this lesson, we get to Ecclesiastes 5, verse 8, through 6, verse 9. And so in this particular lesson, we move from flippant worship to a dangerous God that has been with man since the very beginning. By way of introduction, I'm just going to say we're not going to read through the passage as it is, as it's laid out. We're actually going to read it in terms of, yes, again, another poetic device. And it's interesting, too. I can't help but notice that as we go through Ecclesiastes, these poetic devices are getting more and more complex. I don't know if that's on purpose, or if we're starting simple and building through complexes only to get to then the final answer. We'll find that out as we proceed through Ecclesiastes. But first of all, we're going to read first 5:8 through 12, and then 6:7 through 9, and you'll see why we're doing that. So the very first one, actually we're going to put it this way. We're going to put an A right here. And the very first thing that we're going to see is that the love of money is a sad investment. And I think this marker is a sad investment too. We'll try the other one here. Sad investment. And so we start off with chapter 5, verses 8 through 12. And so just reading those, if you see the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness in a province, do not marvel at the matter. For high official watches over high official, and higher officials are over them. Moreover, the profit of the land is for all, even the king is served from the field. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. So what profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. So now we're going to jump down, and I'm just going to put it right here. Hopefully I leave myself enough room. And again, we're going to see the love of money is a sad investment. So in other words, going to rephrase what we learned up here in chapter 6, and that's verses 7 through 9. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the soul is not satisfied. For what more has the wise man than the fool? What does the poor man have? Who knows how to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. So we're going to come back to this, but now let's circle back up, and we're going to see in section B, and it's going to be the same thing. In section B, chapter 5, verses 13 through 17 is the love of money is a harmful investment. As I write these things, please know I'm not making this stuff up. I'm pulling this straight out of the Reformed expository commentary. Those folks have really done a nice job with this, and I would encourage anybody to invest in this set of the Reformed expository commentary. The love of money is a harmful investment. Chapter 5, verses 13 through 17. And then we're going to see the same thing down here. The love of money is a harmful investment. And that one we're going to find in chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. So listen as we follow along here. Verse 13. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun. Riches kept for their owner to his hurt, but those riches perish through misfortune. When he begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return, to go as he came. And he shall take nothing from his labor which he may carry away in his hand. And this also is a severe evil. Just exactly as he came, so shall he go. And what profit has he who has labored for the wind? All his days he also eats in darkness, and he has much sorrow and sickness and anger. Now, let's pick it up in chapter 6. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself of all he desires, yet God does not give him the power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, and it is an evil, affliction. If a man begets 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with goodness, or indeed he has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better than he. For it comes in vanity and departs in darkness, and its name is covered with darkness. Though it has not seen the sun or known anything, this has more rest than that man, even if he lives 1,000 years twice, but has not seen goodness. Do not all go one place? And then we get right to the center. We're going to call this part C. And you notice there's just one part, and it's couched in the middle of these, and we'll describe that a little bit later here. But we pick it up at verse 18 through 20, and we find in this passage, to trust in God is a wise investment. And that's chapter 5, 18 through 20. Here's what I have seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life which God gives him. For it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God, for he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. So everything we just walked through, again, this is yet another poetic device. And this, what we're looking at here, this is called a chiasm. This is called a chiasm. And that chiasm uses parallel concepts or words to make a point. So here's the point, and then we see the parallels in the parallel passages. We've already seen 3 types of parallelism. We've seen the synonymous parallelism. We see that in verse 10. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. So you see that parallel. It's a synonymous. It's rephrasing the same thing. And we also saw antithetic parallelism. We see that in verse 12. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much. But the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep. This one can sleep, this one can't. Antithetic parallelism. And then there's synthetic parallelism. Chapter 6, verse 7. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the soul is not satisfied. Here you get kind of a rhythmic structure that presents relational thoughts. So this chiasm is a structural device that highlights the point of the text. There's separateness, no parallel, and it's right here. This is separate, and it's central, whereas these are parallel, and they couch outside here. So this right here, you could say, is the whole point of the passage that we're reading. So now let's take each one apart a little bit. We're going to start with the sad investment. Verses And we're going to start with chapter 6, verses 7 through 9, starting at the end of our text. So as we see this, just as we crave for food, just as we eat and enjoy a good meal, it's not permanent. It's a few hours later, we're hungry. We got to go back. We got to get more. Just as our desire for food is never fully satisfied, so it is with our appetite for wealth. How much is enough? A little bit more. You keep going back. I got to get more. I got to get more. And so here Solomon points this out. As all the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet his soul is not satisfied. Just like the appetite. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if the person is rich or poor. It's true no matter what economic level that you're at. If a person's love is money, then he can feed his money appetite all he wants. But he's always going to want more. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and quote one of secular society's, the secular world's greatest philosopher, Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. I can't get no satisfaction. And that's how it is when you're looking for money, trying to satisfy money. This also is vanity. Remember, vanity that we described before is the Hebrew word vapor. It's a wisp, it's a vapor. It's something that's here and it's gone. And then it also recalls that image of trying to lasso a tornado and think that you're going to lasso it and move it from here to there. It's a grasping after the wind. And so the chase for money, the chase to satisfy that money, it's a sad investment because it's never going to be satisfied. It's a vapor. It's there and it's gone. It's like trying to grasp the wind. Now we're going to find same thing up here when we talk about a sad investment. The first thing we see in this passage is the oppression of the poor. Verses 8 and 9, they demonstrate that bureaucratic mess that is corrupt from the top down, in which the whole system is being run by guys who love money. Verse 10, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also vanity. The Reformed Expository Commentary says, and I quote, the rich hoard their wealth, while the poor make it for them. That's what this passage describes. It's that whole bureaucratic system that's corrupt. And Solomon says, don't marvel at this. Don't marvel at the perversion of justice and righteousness. And kind of as an aside, you can't help but point out, while the free market is certainly not void of corruption, there is corruption that takes place. It appears to me that Solomon's description looks a whole lot like communism and elements of socialism, in that while their stated goal is equity among the laborers, really what's happening, there is always, and I mean never fail always, an elite that emerges. The emergence of an elite class that financially benefits from the work of the poor. That's the picture that we see in this passage. And yet the rich or the elite, they're never satisfied. They're trapped trying to grasp the wind. And then Solomon points out that even as their riches increase, so does the circle of dependence around them. Again, the commentary describes them as human leeches. Verse 11 goes on to ask a rhetorical question. What profit have the owners except to see them with their eyes? And the answer is obvious. None. There is no profit. All he can do is watch others suck his money. And we see that this is not just with the rich, but it's also with the poor. And I don't care what race, what color, what ethnic history, the phenomena is the same for all economically depressed areas. I do know, and I read and I hear people say, well, that's just how it is with this particular ethnicity, fill in the blank. No, it's true regardless of the ethnicity. It's true for every economically depressed society. And that is, it's pretty simple. When someone has a job or a revenue source, other family members move in. The other consistency in this is it's a matriarchal society. And why? Because men don't own up to their responsibility and they go off. That's just how it is. Well, this passage, finally, in a turnabout, at least the laborer can sleep from his or her hard work. However, the rich can't sleep out of worry of hanging on and gaining more and more money, and that'll never be satisfied. Hence, we get the conclusion, the love of money is a sad investment. So now let's take a look at the next part. We look at the love of money being a harmful investment. Chapter 5, verses 13 through 17 talks about a severe evil under the sun. Remember that phrase, under the sun, that's referring to living under the curse. Life in this world is living under the curse. The curse going back to Genesis chapter 3. Where riches kept by the owner actually brings hurt. The commentary again points out 3 ways hurt is inflicted upon the owner. First, this hurt, this harmful investment. Let's put that right there. First thing we find out is that riches can be suddenly lost. Be suddenly lost. Verse 14, riches perish through misfortune. And now he can't even support his family. He begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. So he can't even support the family. You know, this phenomena is nothing new. If you read in your history books dating back to 1929, the Great Depression, what phenomena marked that Great Depression when the great market crash, when the crash took place, and what all of a sudden there was an uptick in suicides. People who were just jumping off of buildings, and that's it. I lost everything, all in one day in the great crash of 29. Well, we saw this again in the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. We saw that same uptick in suicides when all of a sudden the wealth is gone. When a person's love is poured into money, there's nothing left to live for when it's all taken away. That's what Solomon is saying. The second thing that we see is that back here, riches are certain to disappear upon death. You're not going to take it with you. Verses 15 and 16 demonstrates that we are born naked and we will die naked, with nothing in our hand to take with us. 1 Timothy 6, verse 7, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we will carry nothing out. Psalm 49, verses 16 and 17, do not be afraid when one becomes rich, when the glory of his house is increased, Verse 17, for when he dies, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. This reminds me of one of my favorite donors, was John T. Vikurovich. There's a lot of places named after him around town. But he was fond of saying, I have never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. And that's true. Not going to take it with. So the third kind of hurt that we find with money is that money is joyless. It is absence of joy. This page turned. There we go. Verse 17, the one who loves money eats in darkness, has much sorrow, sickness, and anger. So remember, we're talking about those who love money, those whose God is money. And as you might expect, I spend a lot of time with major donors who are very wealthy, along with donors who had very little. And there was a common thread among all these donors. Their love was not found in money, but rather they got their joy by giving it away. Let me tell you about two of my favorite gifts. One gift from a couple who were very dear to me. One gift for $5 million. Huge. In fact, their first one, I got a envelope posted in the mail, just handwritten, Roger, got sent in, and I opened it up, and there was a check for $1 million, and that's it. And I called and said, I got something interesting in the mail, and they just laughed. They had so much fun giving that. Here's my other favorite gift. It also came in an envelope, and I opened it up, and on the sheet of paper, taped on the paper was 78 cents. And you could see that it was a kid that wrote on it. And he wrote, I hope this helps build a pool. They're my favorite gift. But the thing is that the commonality between the two, you could tell they were having fun. There was joy in giving it away as opposed to trying to hang on to it. Randy Stonehill, in his song, The Gods of Men, he's saying, I used to dream of being a rich man. Yeah, I swore I'd have it all someday. Once you chase it, you will find that it isn't worth a dime until you're free enough to give it away. All right, now let's turn to the other bookend of this chasm. We find that it's harmful here. Well, we hear it again. It's harmful here. Let's see, here we go. There's an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. Let's talk about this evil. Verses 1 and 2 gives us the picture of a wealthy man living under the curse, believing that his wealth is self-made. Yeah, I did it, baby. This is mine. I built this up. This is my empire. This is my wealth. When actually, it was God who provided this wealth and honor. Yet, he lacks the power to eat of it. What that means is, it's the absence of joy and using what was given to him in the service of the Lord. When it talks about lacking the power to eat of it, it's talking about the absence of joy. This person does not find true joy in all that God has provided. In the end, God is going to use what he provided for his good purposes. We look at verse 3. Now remember, look in verse 3, this is a Hebrew audience. The ultimate blessing among that Hebrew audience was to have wealth, a long life, and many children. That's the ultimate. So it is in verse 3 that we find a man that has a superlative number of children. What does it say? 100 children? Yeah. He begets 100 children, a superlative number. He lives long and is wealthy, but he's not happy with his life. He doesn't recognize God's goodness. That phrase, he has no burial, that refers to a man without honor. He's just not a very nice guy, and no one's going to show up at his funeral. Hence, a long life without the joy of the Lord, as we read in this passage, is far worse than no life at all. And now we come to the central point. Here's the point of all of this. We get to the center part of the chiasm, couched by these sad and harmful investments. We find out what is a good investment. Trusting God. Let me read those verses again. Here's what I have seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth and given him power to eat of it, that's the joy, remember, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart. Honestly, this is very simple. There's nothing mysterious or profound about it. The central point is this. We are to accept the conditions in which God has placed us, and then work hard, enjoy the fruit of our labors, the simple everyday pleasures, while acknowledging the sovereignty of God and the giver of all good things. While reference is made to our work, this doesn't mean just our job in the workplace or the home. This is talking about every part of life. This is talking about our work of growing and exercising faith in our Lord. In essence, what we're finding here is that this is talking about contentment as opposed to covetousness. Covetousness. It is being content with what God has provided, working hard, managing it as a good steward, enjoying all the goodness that God has given in just the right amount, and not hoarding it, and not hanging on and believing that you're self-made. We take what God has provided and we learn and grow in godliness and gratitude. And we pray that God opens our eyes to the goodness around us and to take pleasure in them. That's what this means. So I just want to conclude with some thoughts in here. The bottom line is found in Matthew 6:24. Should be a very familiar verse. No man can serve two masters, for truly coveting money is idolatry. Find that also in Colossians 3, verse 5. And so this brings me to two quotes. First is from the Reformed Expository Commentary. Christianity seeks to destroy money as the god of our hearts and erects in its place the understanding that money is a blessing from God and thus a bridge to God, who is our highest treasure. He is our highest treasure. That's where the investment should go. And so this reminds me of a verse from my all-time favorite hymn. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. And with that, next time you look online, I'll have some kids around and we'll be talking about seeking forgiveness, especially for those secret sins.